So hello everybody and welcome to the Women Talking Money podcast. My name is Gretchen from Magenta Financial Planning, and today I'm joined by Grace Quantock, who has been on the podcast as a guest previously, and we just really wanted to continue on from our first amazing conversation. Grace is an anti-oppressive psychotherapeutic counsellor, writer and advocate, and she helps marginalised folks to live well with pain, illness and trauma, but without disembodiment, burnout or blame. She's author of Living Well with Chronic Illness, out now as ebook, audio and hardback. So welcome back, Grace, and thank you so much for joining me again today.
Thank you so much. It was such an honour to speak to you before. I love the series and I'm so glad to be back with you today.
Fantastic. So do you want to just give us an update? Because we did talk about how actually now, the book is out in hardback. So do you want to give us an update about where you're at with everything?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been really exciting. The book is now out in hardback. It's also in ebook and audiobook. And I also narrate the audiobook, which is a really, really special experience to be able to do. And you can get it from hopefully your favourite local indie bookseller. If not, it's also stocked in Waterstones across the UK, which is just kind of terrifying when I looked on the website and realised that I could see it in all the stores. And I actually rang one of the stores because it said it was available in 2 hours. And I said, does that mean if somebody ever asks for it, you'll get it in? And she said, no, 2 hours means it's on the shelf. 2 days means that it's on the computer and they can get it. So I said, so when it says within 2 hours and there's all these listings saying 2 hours, that means it's on the shelf in all the shops. That's a bit terrifying. It's the moment when it goes from your hands and you realise actual strangers are going to read it. Oh my goodness, and it stops being the thing that you've looked after for so long and it's out in the world. It also got featured fascinatingly in a double-page spread in the Daily Mail.
Excellent.
Which involved a photo shoot, which I took completely the wrong message from and was completely overexcited that my rescue dog Wilfred was featured in the photo shoot. So did we focus on there being a marginalised disabled woman in a right-wing newspaper talking about anti-fat bias, LGBT rights, racism in healthcare? No, I did not focus on that. I got completely overexcited about the fact that my whippet was in the photograph. I care about all that, but just
I think that's perfectly normal and usual for people.
Thank you. So this is where we are. We're doing our best for getting out in the world.
Excellent. And all the more important right now, given everything that's going on in the world around marginalised groups and oppression of conversations.
Exactly. This is the hope, and that's, every time somebody picks it up, reads it, gets it from the library, it's stocked in a lot of libraries, which I'm really excited about. And my grandmother kept going to ask her local library for it, and they eventually stocked it. She kept getting the bus up and asking them. And when they said, we've got it, they said, do you want it? And she said, no, I've already got a copy. She didn't explain that she was related to me or anything. So I think
just trying to get them to get it in stock.
So which I appreciate, right? Every review, every stockist does make a difference because, disabled women from the South Wales Valleys don't get book deals at Big Five publishers often enough. Demonstrating that we can sell well helps hopefully future people be supported when people are looking at profit and loss.
Absolutely. Well, congratulations. It's a massive achievement. So thanks, to coming back to talk about money.
Yes.
I've got a different set of questions this season, and I know that we covered off quite a lot last time, but we're going to run through a few different ones today and hopefully, engage in that brilliant conversation like we had last time. So Grace, how would you describe your current relationship with money in one word, if you can, and why would you use that word?
Okay. So I think at the moment, my relationship with money is about interdependence. So that's interdependence, not independence. And I think this is really important because, I started my business when I was hearing a lot of things about financial freedom, about money creating independence and freedom and the ability to make your own choices and decisions. And all of that, in many ways, sounds great. And I really, really, to some extent, believe in, because of course I want to be able to make decisions about my care, about where I go, about how about the food I eat, about whether I can travel somewhere. All these are decisions I want to be able to make. But more and more, I think that financial freedom, when we talk about it, it's as though there's an idea that if we eventually accrue enough money, we will be safe, or we won't need to rely on other people. But I actually believe that we're all interdependent. So as a disabled person, I need care. I'm sick. And I also offer care. So I care for my partner who's also disabled. We care for each other. And I also care, for family and chosen family. And we often make these kind of differentiations between what is and isn't okay. So somebody might need to buy bread from Tesco, and that's fine. That's normal, right? But maybe if I need help making bread, actually, I can't eat bread, but if I need help making a meal, or I need help washing, for example, that's seen as not okay. Or it's a little bit like somebody might be judged if they're an ambulatory wheelchair user, so they can walk maybe a little bit, or sometimes, but not all of the time. Or sometimes, if that's the case, you get judged for using a wheelchair. People and strangers will say, oh, you shouldn't be using that wheelchair. But what if you use a wheelchair to get a distance that you can't walk on your own? But do they use a car to get a distance that they can't walk on their own? So we're talking about two four-wheeled vehicles. One's an okay one and one's a not okay one. But of course they're both okay. We're just using tools to get where we need to go and do what we need to do. We're all interdependent. We all rely on something and somebody, but we've somehow drawn these lines between this is an okay thing to need and this is a shameful thing to need, or this is a problematic thing to need. And so, yeah, I'm thinking about how money can't really stop us being interdependent. I don't think we can actually amass enough money to keep us safe, as you say, particularly in these times and with climate crisis. But I think we can build community. And actually, one of my goals this year is to set up a mutual aid fund with my friend groups. We'll all put in some money according to what we can afford to put in. And then anybody in the group can use it as needed as an emergency fund. And that also, for me, takes it out of the realm of like charity, which is often seen as something that's given out of kindness. And then, of course, if you receive it, you feel like you need to be grateful. Whereas this is more about justice and dignity and about interdependence, that we're all part of the same community, that we all want each other to be well because we all rely on each other. And so there's hopefully this pot of money that people can dip into as needed, not needing to ask, oh, like, can you loan me so-and-so?
I love that idea, Grace. I think that's
Thank you.
amazing. And it's also in my mind kind of reminiscent of a conversation I had with another lady, which was around religion and tithing and giving money to the church, which then supported a community. And this is not the same, but it's a similar kind of concept in the way that we would, put some physical money, because money is needed for that emergency funding and for things that go wrong, but in a group of people that you trust, that you'll put that forward. And then presumably what you're thinking is, if someone does need to sadly call on that in the year, then the following year, that there will be the ideal is, I guess, it would be replenished and it would be affordable for everyone to be able to kind of keep that as an almost like an extra level of insurance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I'm excited about it.
I like it. And I think the concept of this interdependence, as you say, or independence, many of us are striving for independence because that might be what our societal pressure or need says that we should do. But actually the concept that we're not actually ever fully independent is quite realistic, because, whether you're single, with people, in a relationship, with friendship groups, whatever, there is always going to be, even if you're reliant later on in the future for someone to help you with the needs that you have, interdependence. So I think it's a great answer and a great word. Yeah, I like that a lot. And how have you gone about, if I may ask, having that conversation with those community members or friends? That, how has that come about? Because so often, we don't talk about this stuff. We don't talk about the money side of things. So what triggered that conversation start?
Well, I haven't actually had it yet because
Okay.
it was on my January list to do, and my January, like I think everybody's January, has been both 10,000 years long and 10,000 shades of difficult. So it didn't get done in
It's
January.
a conversation to have. I love
a conversation to have.
But it's your idea and concept that you'd like to put out
Well,
there.
I've read it. I've come across other people doing it. I mean, I can't think exactly where now, but I've known other people doing it. And of course, already in the group, people have loaned money. And so, like when I was very, very sick at one point, they just messaged me and said, "Oh, we just put some money in your bank account." And, I was able to use that to pay for some complementary treatment that I wouldn't have been able to pay for otherwise. And so I feel like already there is sometimes in friendship groups or in communities, it can feel like everyone's passing the same £50 around back and forth to each other. And that's not a bad thing, but it's just formalizing that and actually saying, well, we're going to put this pot here. And I mean, it came up for me because I was doing my yearly plan. I've used for many, many years these guides by Leonie Dawson, these kind of life goals workbooks and business goals workbooks. And in it, I was thinking like, it asked questions about how you're going to build your community this year. And so I had things in there. I was like, I want to write more letters to some of my friends who are distant. And then I thought, well, actually, this is something that I can do. It's got questions about money, how you're going to donate, how you're going to earn, how you're going to help make your community more supported or kind of. So like, it kind of came out of that. I have my various kind of tasks that I'm gradually working on. And hopefully by the time this comes out, I will have done that.
Yeah, I love the concept. I think it's a way of actually showing independent or allowing independence by some kind of interdependence, which is a strange concept, because worry around money when we're in an emergency situation or a restricted situation reduces our independence. But actually, if we had this fund that, put is interdependent, but we know we can go to, we don't have to ask, and that gives actually a layer of independence.
I love that. I hadn't thought of it like that, but now you say it, I can totally see it. Yes.
Excellent. So moving on a bit from that then, I want to talk a little bit more around, especially with your experiences with chronic illness and things like that, but what role has money played in shaping the career choices, decisions you've made, taking opportunities that have been given to you? But also, how has that impacted, as an able-bodied person, I can talk about career choices, making them probably in quite a free way. But, how does that be impacted by your illness? And have you had to put in place, help to kind of be able to make those decisions? I guess that's quite a long-winded question, but yeah.
No, it's a great question. So yeah, absolutely. And I really felt this when I was first starting the business, because I started my business in 2011. So I actually wrote the book in the few years before that. And then I actually launched the business in 2011. And, that was kind of girl boss era. So, as I was kind of coming up, I was coming up with a lot of people who were doing business in a way that was very much said to be around empowerment and kind of self-expression, which is great. But for some people, there was a lot of people relying perhaps on family money or a redundancy payout from a corporate career, for example. And I was living, on benefits and was just at first just trying to get permission to be able to legally be allowed to earn. And there was, in some of what I do, like, for example, being a therapist, sometimes there has been almost shame about needing to earn, as though it's wrong to say that you have to charge. And I always remember the website I had before my current website, which the old website I designed and coded myself. We did it from scratch. And I remember a colleague once telling me, I don't like your website. It looks too American and it looks like you're selling something. And I said, well, I am selling something. I'm actually selling quite a few things. I really hope people buy them. That's kind of the idea. That's why the website's there. I want them to reach people. So that's good, surely. And she was like, no. It looks like you're selling. I said, well, what's wrong with selling? Why would I create something to then not have it? I don't understand why, and not have it reach people. And of course, I've been very lucky because I was mentored from very, very early on by one of my great teachers and friend, Erica Learmark, who's the author of the book Think Like a Stripper. So she started as a stripper. She then built a multi-million-dollar real estate company, and now she teaches kind of business confidence to women. She's doing a great program at the moment I'm also in called Curate, about curating your messages that you're putting out in business and online, on social media, being unmistakable, unforgettable, because you're not just like responding to the kind of hot take of the day. You're actually putting out stuff that's really aligned, that really matters, that really resonates. And so, I always remember on all her calls, so for many years now, every time you speak, you have to say your name, your business, and where you come from. So you had to pitch yourself every single time. And she said, every time you don't do that, it's a wasted opportunity. Somebody could know your name, somebody could be waiting for what you're offering. And so she was really upfront about needing to sell, and it really, really helped me. But I also saw the juxtaposition for some people who felt that money was shameful, or that selling was shameful, or that we should somehow be able to exist without that. And I was saying, yeah, but I'm sick, so I have a limited amount of capacity, a limited amount of energy. I have to make money in the times that I'm doing that. I cannot mooch about on Facebook and call that marketing. The marketing has to be laser and it has to be effective because, from the beginning, I knew I had to earn and this had to work. And if it didn't, I was going to have to keep iterating until it did. So I didn't really have much of a cushion. There wasn't really much time in which I could try it out and kind of see or play about and kind of experiment, because when I first started I could literally I would literally, like, we're talking minutes at a time, that I could sit up and look at a list, and then that went into hours, and then eventually days, and then of course there were times when I couldn't do anything at all and I was very, very sick. So it also has to be very flexible working.
So it feels like what you're saying is you had to go all in, and there wasn't much kind of like, oh, I'll try this for a little bit and see, because we talked last time about what effort it took you to get out of the reliance on benefits. And, once you're earning over a certain amount of money, that benefit is not getting paid, but it's not much really to like live on. So you've got to really up the ante to get like out of it and then also earn a living.
And what happens if you become too sick? What happens if you come off the benefit and you think you're going to be okay, and then suddenly you have a flare or you come out of remission or something happens, and then you can't get back on the benefit? So I also had to make sure I had kind of ways that I could do even when I was really sick.
So have you got things in place with your finances now which help you juggle the fact that you do have to be that little bit more flexible, and you might have a flare up and you might not be able to earn for a couple of weeks or whatever that looks like?
Yeah. So I try and have, we try and call it a surprise fund or a safety fund. I got a surprise fund from Kate Northrup because she said she didn't want to call it an emergency fund because she didn't want to manifest emergencies. So we call it a surprise fund because there could be a lovely surprise or there could be a horrible surprise. So we have a surprise fund in place that makes sure the business can still pay me, can still pay my assistant who helps me, who's a fantastic person, who is Nicola from New Generation VA, who's a brilliant assistant who helps me kind of keep the show on the road, and all of that. It means that I can do this, and also making sure that I have flexibility in the work I do. So for example, if I'm more sick, I can move things around in the week, or if I'm more sick, perhaps I can do some meetings off camera when I'm lying down. And sometimes I've been to meetings and I've said, I'm in a lot of pain today. I am really sick. This may not be as erudite, this may not be as clear as I would like it to be. And you know what? I ask you to persevere with me. I'm going to say it anyway.
Yeah. And be confident in that, I think, and be confident you've still got something to deliver. And it's really interesting when you said about that colleague of yours saying, oh, it looks too salesy. It comes back to multiple conversations that we've been having on this podcast around money blocks that women set for themselves. I'm not saying that's where you were, but maybe that's where she was, that maybe we've got, well, I can earn that much, but, I'm not, it's not right to be wanting to get to this level, or it's not right to sell, or it should be flowing to me without effort. I think all of those things, you have to find your own path for it, don't you? And for some people, those things can be restrictive, and it's understanding whether you've got those things that are kind of blocking your decisions and self-limiting yourself, really.
And just checking on how we've absorbed those over time, that it's okay to do this much, but this much would be too much, or this much is wrong for somebody like you. Yeah, this, it speaks to that. One of my teachers, Kelly Deals, talked about she read an article about Gloria Steinem, the activist and author, and she said she realized towards her later years that actually she had no money for retirement, no money for emergencies, because she'd earned very well, but she'd given it all away. She'd given it to people who thought she needed more than her. And so her and a friend decided, we need to get me a retirement fund. And because she was Gloria Steinem, she was able to get like a 1.2 million book deal. And Kelly was talking and saying, well, actually, I see that and I don't think that's too much. I think finally we're getting started. Finally, we're getting somewhere, that she should get that. But it's also speaking to how many women and marginalized people don't have these resources, not because there's some kind of, often very patriarchal or male money gurus say, oh, you made bad choices, but What if instead you were caring and your labour wasn't recognised or your labour wasn't valued and you're in this position? Well, how do we then figure out what you can do, what you can leverage? When I was very, very sick, I did a lot of copywriting and ghostwriting because, I couldn't sit up very much, I couldn't speak very much, but I could still write lying down. And that's something that was very flexible that I could kind of do around different things that I could still leverage and start to, build up that emergency fund.
Surprise fund.
Surprise fund. Thank you. Exactly.
And how do you balance? I mean, I remember talking to you last time about, the kind of workbooks you do about your planning for the year and budgeting and things like that. But how do you, and maybe also your husband, because, you are a couple joint thinking about finances, approach the balance between saving for the future, whatever that might feel or look like, and enjoying more about what you've got today?
I mean, I think we're both savers, so that helps. Kind of, we both have an urge towards that. But I think often what I want in living with chronic illness is things that sounds cliched, is things that money can't buy. So, for example, I used to have a star chart where I'd give myself stars, like I was a child. If I was a child, I had a star chart. If I could do things that were difficult, I'd earn stars for them towards a prize. That didn't really work because the prize was going to McDonald's, and I didn't actually want to go to McDonald's. So we probably should have picked a book or something. I don't know why we picked that. But so as an adult, sometimes I'd give myself a star chart, and I'd be like, okay, I'll get like some art supplies if I can do this painful thing, like taking this medication that I need to take, but it makes me really sick and I don't want to take it. But then I started realizing that actually I didn't want more art supplies. What I wanted was the energy and the skill to use the art supplies I already had. And so I started realizing I focus now more on kind of spending or saving on what I need and checking my impulses, because it isn't always obtained with money. So, for example, am I trying to buy exercise gear because I think that's going to make me feel well, and that's easier than confronting the fact that I really need to go back and see my cardiologist again? Or am I shopping online, like looking at some accessibility equipment for my wheelchair, to get outside and do kind of wheelchair rides more, because that's easier than acknowledging that the pavements are really broken and aren't getting fixed, and it's really scary. So I try to be honest about what I really need and how to get that. Sometimes it is with money, but not always. And I always notice,
I understand that.
Kind of balancing that is kind of how I focus it, rather than if it's spending, it's if it's going to get me where I want to be.
Yeah, and that mindfulness around some of those decisions. Yeah. So this is a question that I didn't get to ask you last time, so we're going to do it now, which is around financial freedom. And so what does financial freedom, if I ask you about it, mean to you, and how are you working towards it? If you aren't already there, because some people tell me they're already there, so I can't assume you're not there, but.
Again, when I was kind of coming up, financial freedom was taught to me to be being mortgage free or having enough passive income to cover your bills. But that's not how I see financial freedom. So, I saw from a financial advisor, and he said, what is a couple of your goals for retirement? And I said, freedom, liberty. And he was like, travel. I was like, no, being free. He was like, a cruise. No. Liberty, freedom. I need to stay free. Grace, I don't get it. Like you want to, I don't know, what do you want to do? You don't want to go on a cruise, you don't want to travel, do you want to buy another house? I was like, nope, freedom. Okay, so what I actually meant by this was I want to be able to make decisions about my care and health and safety and not have somebody make them for me who may look at me as a wheelchair user, as a disabled woman, as somebody with multiple complex conditions, and think that my life isn't worth living. So, during COVID, for example, at one point, people with my conditions, with my capacity, were assessed as being not meeting the criteria for life-saving care. So had I contracted COVID at that point, they would not have attempted potentially to save my life, but would have given me comfort care and let me die. Now, that's really hard to process. Now, that's no against the medics who were dealing with horrendous things and rationing care. And it is a critique of a government who tried at one point to divide into who could live and die based on, at one point, the criteria involved, could you do heavy housework? I do not think that's the criteria we should be using to decide how we ration care, which we shouldn't obviously be having to ration in the first place, and yet unfortunately did in that crisis. So I want to be able to live in the community, live interdependently. And, a lot of disabled people, councils are going bankrupt, funding is getting cut, people's care packages are getting cut. There's a great article by Frances Ryan in The Guardian. She's an award-winning journalist. She wrote about an issue in Bristol where a lot of disabled people living in the community with domiciliary care were actually having their care cancelled. Some people didn't even know about it. They were going to be taken back and, as they put it, warehoused in care homes. Now, some people are happy to live in care homes. That's a great interdependent community. That's great there. That's wonderful. But if that's not your home and you don't want to live there and you would lose your carers that you've lived with and worked with for years, then that's a huge difference. And so to me, financial freedom is to be able to make those decisions about my care, and more widely about being part of a society that recognises wealth as collective and not individual. So I'm not just trying to build money, I'm trying to build community, because I just don't want to accrue personal wealth while other people suffer, as though anybody could get enough money that would protect them from needing other people, that would mean that you don't need to have community and trust. And so it's something that I'm trying to work to be able to make decisions about my own care and my own future, but also be able to be in community with people that I trust alongside that.
So a lot of that, though, as you rightly say, is that actually financial freedom or freedom and liberty is then therefore more around, our structure and our societal decisions, and trying to ensure that your position is respected to be able to be independent stroke interdependent, but on your own terms.
On my own terms. Exactly. And I think I'd like more of us to think about this, and this is why I love your work so much. I think we need to think about making our wills, doing power of attorney, doing an advance directive, thinking about a funeral plan, thinking about what eldering is going to look like, age is going to look like, what our care decisions are going to be, what we want care to look like if we were to need care. So often people say to me all the time, I'll do it when I need it. I'll go to the care home, I'll get the wheelchair, I'll get the stick, I'll get the adaptation, I'll do the power of attorney when I need to. So with the greatest respect, nobody, I'd say probably very rarely, wakes up and goes, gosh, today is the day I am ready to leave my home because I am now very old and I feel old and I am now ready to move into an old person's home. Nobody feels that. And that's not how I would describe eldering or old, but nobody is going to say, often it comes when there's a crisis happens. And I get the resisting, it's not the same, but years ago, my goodness, our car was so rickety and I was learning to drive. My driving instructor was like, Grace, you've got to get a new car. And I was saying, yeah, but we've got no money to get a new car. I said, it's fine. We just keep pouring this kind of stuff in the engine. It gets us another kind of 50 miles. We just keep doing that until it stops, right? It'll be fine. It's terrible. And he said, do you want to do that? He's like, do you want to have to buy a new car when it's an emergency? Or do you want to buy a new second-hand car now when you've got about another month of space left? I thought, yeah, why am I creating my own emergency? That makes no sense. And yet so many times we resist things and we create unknowingly, unintentionally, we end up in these emergencies. And of course, sometimes that pushes you into a decision, so you haven't got to own the decision, because then it feels like, well, of course I had no choice. But I'd rather have that choice, I think.
That plays into that financial resilience thing as well, doesn't it? Because so often we're like, the surprise fund or the emergency fund needs to cover so that if your car did break down without you expecting it to, yes, that you would have an option, and the financial resilience to not have to make a panic decision. But you're right. Why do we take ourselves to the edge all the time of knowing, when it reminds me, and bearing in mind my dad listens to this podcast just because I'm his daughter and he supports me. But he's had this boiler replacement budget in his financial plan for, I want to say, about 8 years. And every year I'm like, I haven't had to replace it yet. He's like, no, but the money's there if I need to replace it. But he's kind of pushing it to its nth degree. And at one point it'll break. And then does that mean then they are in the cold in February for a month because they can't get a replacement boiler, when actually they do have the money to do it, but they haven't done it because this one will just eke out and the guy comes and pours something into it and it works?
Yeah.
And that's what you're saying, isn't it? It's like, do we have to, or can we just sort of reframe that decisioning of actually I can prevent my own emergency because I have the resilience to do it already?
Exactly. And what's worth that? Because of course, often, as you say, it's not just the money, it's access to the services, it's access to the experts, the tradespeople. We can't guarantee all of that. And I know many people are in a situation at the moment where they simply can't build up a safety fund, where just day to day is utterly bizarre and so difficult. But that also means that if you do have the funds, you perhaps think, well, I just won't spend it. It's accruing interest. We'll just keep it there for that. That's then again a question of safety. What makes you feel safe? Does it make you feel safe to see the money in the bank account in the boiler repair fund, replacement fund, or do you feel safe in knowing that I have a boiler that I can trust and that I know that were there, God forbid, to be some kind of emergency, we wouldn't be stuck? I mean, we're seeing people experiencing the impacts of climate fallout, here in Wales as well. It's so painful. We were in the red warning just recently, and I was getting out, solar charger, the wood burner that we've we've got that we don't use, but is there, for emergencies, and kind of making sure I have the camping kettle ready. It's exhausting. So when we can avoid that, let's.
I like that. I like that a lot. So if you could give one piece of financial advice to a younger Grace, what would that be?
I love this question. I thought about it, and to me, I really didn't come up with something because for ages, because I thought, I wished that we hadn't lived below the poverty line for so long. But that wasn't our fault, so there was nothing else I could do about it. So I won't blame my younger self for benefits not taking us above that, or for needing those benefits, or for not legally being able to work for all of those things. So I thought I can't say like you should have saved into a pension earlier, because I didn't have an option to do that. So these are systemic issues. What I will say, I wish I had done, and it's a piece of advice I think for more than just me, is if you get an option to join the waiting list and you don't know whether you want the thing, just join the waiting list. Because then, when the thing comes up, if you don't want it, you can say no thank you to it and there's no harm done. But if you decide you do want it, 6 months, 2 years' time, you're going to be 2 years behind on the waiting list. A friend of mine when I was a teenager, an activist friend, we did activism for climate and nature emergencies, and they said to me, you should get on the waiting list for social housing. And I kind of thought, I suppose that's not a bad idea. But of course, I was like 16 and was very overwhelmed by the bureaucracy of it and didn't end up doing it. And of course, then later I was very sick and needed to live in social housing. But had I been on the waiting list for several years, I would have had 1 point in my favour. Only 1 point in my favour, but I didn't have a lot of points in my favour to get housing. So it was, of course, it was a very, very difficult situation. So, that would have made it a little bit easier. And things like, I used to do volunteer as grief counsellor for cruise bereavement, and the waiting list was so long. I would say to people, if you don't know if you're going to bereavement counselling, if you get on the waiting list and it comes up and they've got you a counsellor, you can say no thank you. But if you decide you need one, you're not going to get one quickly because the waiting list is so long. So always, if we've got an option for a waiting list, if we get on it, then we can start now and decide not to use it later. But if you decided yes, then you're ahead.
Good advice, I think. Yeah. And, you're right. And also, there's no harm in just being on the waiting list. It doesn't mean that you've got to do it, does it, as you say?
They'll be delighted to have a space.
Yeah, exactly. Give it up. Give it up for someone else if you don't need it. Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you, if money was no object at all, do you think your life would look different?
Here's the thing. When you say this to me, my first thought goes to, if money were no object, then we'd have easier lives collectively. Because things like people being unhoused wouldn't be based on whether there was funding. Then I thought, does this mean me individually? Because if money were no object just for me, I think that would be very sad. Because then it's just me. And it's like, for example, I can't make a beautiful garden surrounded by climate crisis and wildfires, for example, and sit happily in my garden, not as though the wider world doesn't affect it, as though I could create some kind of oasis in which there are bees and there are no illnesses for the birds and it is all okay. And actually, I do have a garden and we are doing special anti-infection prevention control bird feeding, and we are trying to get bees. But that's part of my wider work for, to try and avert climate injustice. So I think it's, for when money were no object for all of us, yes, please. If money were no object for just me personally, I think I'd really struggle.
Almost find it more of a burden than a relief.
what would I do? Could it be just for me? Could I help other people? And if not, what torture is this that I have to have enough and watching my
you
loved
could
ones
help
suffer?
other people, but it isn't that everybody has no money.
Yes.
It was more that it isn't that everyone has unlimited money. It would be that, presuming you had no financial worries, would life look different,
I think is a tricky question, because I think, as you say, I would get so caught up in who I could help and how I could help. I think my life would look a lot more concerned about it. I think I'd be a lot more stuck actually in whether I was doing the right thing and using the resources enough.
And it can be, many conversations, money makes a lot of people more anxious and more worried and more concerned about whether they're using it in the right way than if they've just got enough or if they're just comfortable. And that is a big psychological barrier for a lot of people, actually. Like, what would I do? I'm only a small cog in a very big, big world. So,
and that's something for me to keep working on.
Absolutely.
So thank you for raising that for me.
It could be that you could reverse it and go, if you had all the money and you had no worries, and it could, let's assume that money, Grace, can buy you the liberty that you need. It would then just give you more freedom to help other people and help the causes that are important to you even more.
This is true. This is possibly the way forward. Yes, so I would then be free to be able to do more of what I hope to do in the world. I love that reframe. Thank you. You're so good at this.
Thank you. Okay, so we're just about to run out of time, because I think you and I could, talk about this kind of thing for a long, long time. But I want to end today on what's one thing you would like, our listeners, and in particular, women, to know or think differently about when it comes to their money or money. It doesn't have to be their money.
So I think for me, it would be around that thinking about how we value our labour and what we do and don't put aside. So it is that thinking about, how can I set myself up for the future? How can I make sure that I am doing, as we said, not getting into that Gloria Steinem position? How can I do the wills? How can I do the power of attorney? How can I do what I need to do to get myself set up in a way that doesn't feel overwhelming? Because so often for so many people it does absolutely become completely overwhelming. I think doing this is an act of power, both for ourselves and interdependently for the community. And I think, when, as you've just helped me think about again, that when we are abundantly resourced, we can share and invest. We can't share and invest what we don't have. The more resources we have, the more, both personally and collectively, the more we can leverage those to create change. So I don't believe it's selfish to earn, save, to build resources, especially when the systems that we live in very often weren't built for us. And in many cases, they were built on the expectation that we keep providing uncompensated work, uncompensated care. But we can, just as we said at the beginning, create conditions, create groups, create structures where we care for each other sustainably, and when we can create these changes that we want to see.
Well, Grace, thank you so much. And thank you so much for talking to me again today. I've really, really enjoyed it. And I'm sure the listeners will have, again, got some really amazing takeaways. So thank you so much.
It's an honour. I love your questions. Thank you so much.